Greetings everyone, I'm Adam Haritan. Welcome to the woods of Western Pennsylvania. It's a beautiful morning, it's late winter, nearly spring, and in this video I want to show you how you can easily locate and identify elms, specifically American elm and slippery elm, when you pay attention to one feature in particular. Now why would I focus on elms in this video at the exclusion of every other tree in this wooded area? Well, the reason is morel mushroom season is nearly here, or it is here for some of you. And if you know anything about morels, you know that certain species of morels associate with elms. And if you know where elms grow and you can identify elms, then you can drastically increase your chances of finding certain species of morels. So what is this feature of elms that I'm talking about? Well, let's take a look around this wooded area and let's focus our attention up. So let's look up into the canopy, and what do we notice? Well, we notice that there's not much going on, and that's no surprise because it is late winter, spring isn't even here, so we don't really expect to find too much activity, at least where I live in Western Pennsylvania. We do see some leaves hanging on from last year, and that feature is called marcescence, but elms typically aren't a marcescent group of trees. So we don't really expect to use that clue of marcescence to help us identify elms. What else do we notice when we look around the canopy? Well, what we notice is a lack of something. We notice that there are hardly any flowers on trees. Now you might be saying, yeah, of course, there's no flowers on trees. It's so early in the season. But we can use that as a clue to help us identify elms, because what's interesting about elms is that elms are flowering right now. So what we're doing is paying attention to something called phenology. Phenology is the study of the timing of biological events. So when do the wood frogs return to vernal pools to breed? When do snow trilliums bloom? When do eastern phoebes return? When do American chestnut leaves turn yellow in the fall? Well, when do American and slippery elms flower? That's phenology. And if we pay attention to that, we can locate elms and identify elms much more easily, because the thing about these two species of elm is that they are among the first trees to flower in areas where they grow. Now, elms aren't the only trees that flower so early in the year, but they are among, I would say, less than 10 or so angiosperm trees, or flower-producing trees, that are flowering right now, late winter, early spring. So you could be driving around, you could be walking on a trail, you could be walking on a ridge looking down into the valley, and just look at which trees are flowering. And if you see flowers on trees, you can narrow down your choices from well over 100 species, depending on where you live, to I'd say 8 or less tree species. And 2 of those could be American elm and slippery elm. So when we look up into the canopy, we could see that some trees are flowering. Now, I'll tell you right now that American elm and slippery elm flowers aren't that big and showy, but they're there. And we could see that they're there even from the forest floor. So depending on sunlight, depending on conditions, some of these flowers can look yellowish or golden when the sun's hitting them. But when we look more closely, we can see that these flowers are shades of red and green and maybe some brown as well. Now, there is a difference between American elm flowers and slippery elm flowers, but they do look very similar. So American elm flowers are produced in clusters that droop, they hang down, while the flowers of slippery elm are more compact and they're produced in rounded clusters. And I like to say they almost look like fireworks exploding on the tree. So which tree is this? Well, this is an elm. This is American elm. And when I look up into the canopy, I can see that there are flowers on this tree. Now, when I take a look around, most of these trees don't have flowers on them. No surprise, it is late winter. Spring is not even here yet. However, some of the trees do have flowers on them, and these trees aren't elms. So I mentioned a couple times that elms aren't the only trees that are flowering right now. So what other trees are flowering at the same time that elms are flowering? We need to know this information so that we can positively identify elms and not confuse them for other trees that are out here. So other trees that are flowering right now, at least where I live, include red maple, silver maple, quaking aspen, and big-tooth aspen. Those are the primary contenders. Yes, there might be some other trees that are starting to bud. There are some other trees that are non-native that might be flowering, some ornamental trees. There are some shrubs that are starting to flower. But in areas where you might find an elm, those are the other trees that you need to consider. Red maple, silver maple, bigtooth aspen, quaking aspen. Now when you look at the flowers of aspens, you will see that they look very different from the flowers of elms. So the flowers of aspens are produced in pendulous catkins that are quite long and also fuzzy or hairy. Now the flowers of red maple and silver maple, they look like one another. And from a distance, the flowers of red maple and silver maple kind of look like the flowers of American elm and slippery elm. When you look at them up close, you will see that they are very different. So how do you tell the difference between maples and elms from a distance? Well, look at the branching arrangement, because the branching arrangement of maples is opposite, while the branching arrangement of elms is alternate. Now, of course, we can also look at bark pattern as well, but the thing is, red maple bark can look similar to elm bark. So as a red maple matures, it kind of looks like this American elm bark right here. But if you look higher up the trunk of a red maple, you will see that it's much smoother. It's almost American beech-like. And a younger red maple is very smooth and beech-like as well. Now, because elms are among the first trees to flower, they're also among the first trees to produce fruits. And these fruits can appear on a particular tree 2 weeks after a tree flowers. So it happens really quickly. And from a distance, it can be kind of difficult to see what these fruits look like. But if you look more closely, you will see that the fruits are these rounded samara structures. The fruits of American elm typically have hairs around the margins of the fruits, while the fruits of slippery elm typically lack these hairs or only have a few scattered hairs around the margins of the samaras. Now it's important to keep in mind that when elms are flowering, that's not necessarily the time to be looking for morel mushrooms, at least where I live. Now yes, some people are starting to find morels in the county in which I live, but peak morel season is still a few weeks away. So when elms are flowering, then they fruit a few weeks after that. I start looking for morels when these leaves are starting to appear on the trees. But the point of paying attention to phenology is just to help you locate and identify and scout out areas where elms are growing so that you can come back in a few weeks and hopefully find the morels that are associated with these trees. Now, having said everything that I said, if you find an elm that's got lots of flowers on it, it might not be an ideal tree that will be associated with lots of morel mushroom fruiting bodies, because morels associate with dead and dying elms. And of course, a dead tree won't be able to produce any flowers or fruits. However, you can still use this information to find out where elms are growing, because if you're finding one elm, there's a good chance that there are more elms nearby. So if you're walking in an area and you look up and you see trees that are flowering and you can identify those trees as elms and they look like they're healthy elms, well, take a look around, because you're probably going to find a few dead elms here and there, or dying elms, elms that aren't doing so well. Those are the trees that you want to come back to when the temperature warms up a bit and you hit peak morel mushroom season. Now, of course, there are a few more features we could look at to help us positively identify elms. We're not going to go over them in this video, because the point of this video is to get you to pay attention to something that field guides don't really get you to pay attention to, and that is phenology. When are certain things happening? When we look at a hardwood forest this time of year, we gaze upwards and we look up into the canopy. We see that not much is going on, but something is going on. If we pay attention more closely, we see that certain trees are flowering late winter through early spring. These are the first trees to flower, and among the first trees to flower include elms, both American elm and slippery elm. And if we want to improve our tree identification skills, pay attention to phenology. If we want to find morel mushrooms in a few weeks after these trees flower and fruit, pay attention to phenology. Thank you so much for watching this video. I truly appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. If you want to support this channel, please subscribe to the Learn Your Land YouTube channel and head on over to learnyourland.com and sign up for the email newsletter so that we can stay in touch. Thank you again for watching. I will see you on the next video.